Democratic Congressman Jimmy Panetta, who represents Monterey and San Benito counties and parts of Santa Clara counties in California. We have a lot to talk to you about today. One of the big pieces of legislation that you were sponsoring that overwhelmingly passed the House last night. But first, we've got this letter now from the President to Nancy Pelosi that has just been sent, basically saying, and you'll recognize the signature here, basically saying, you know, I'll be there, and I'm so happy you invited me, and you invited me even before the shutdown. So, and my people don't say that there's any security issue. So he's basically daring her to disinvite him and no longer say that it's a security issue because of the shutdown, to disinvite him because of the propriety or whatever, the politics of having him there addressing the nation from her venue in the middle. What should she do now?
Well,
and what is your reaction to his letter?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on this show. Second of all, this is just dialing up the rhetoric. And based on my discussions with my constituents at home on the Central Coast, also includes Santa Cruz County, this is not what people sent me here to be a part of. People sent me here to be a part of legislation and be trying to solve problems, not create chaos, not create problems. Unfortunately, right now, all they're seeing is this, letters like this, jabs, tit for tats, be it not speaking, be it going on a codel or not going on a codel. And that's very unfortunate because right now, all of us look bad. And all of us, though, need to come to the table and be able to try to figure this out. We need to open up this government, and then we can start negotiating. Enough of this, enough of this. Now it's time to actually start legislating. But let me tell you, it takes time, and because it takes time, we have to open up the government.
Well, to that point, there was, according to Jim Clyburn, Benny Thompson, and others whom we spoke to on the Hill today, our team up there, that there was the outlines of a possible compromise where these big votes tomorrow would go down, House and Senate, and then people would come together on a short-term continuing resolution, which is always what's been done, with a guarantee that the president will get a markup in committee on the Senate side on his bill for a wall with real testimony or more border security. There's money for it, clearly. This is not a fiscal issue now.
Correct.
This is a political issue. Does that get sabotaged by this, you know, this letter dialing up the personal animosity, or should Nancy Pelosi just say, let whoever does whatever, and let's get back to the basics of negotiating a compromise?
Sure. Look, I think what we've seen is that you have to rise above these types of letters. What we know is that you can't out-Trump Trump. We know that. We've seen that. And therefore, I would hope that leadership, Democrat and Republican leadership, House and Senate, be able to rise above this and actually get things done. This type of negotiation, it can be very complex. When you're dealing with border security, when you're dealing with immigration reform, it is very complicated, and therefore it takes time. And so I would love to see a CR to open up the government and then allow Congress to actually come to the table with each of their proposals. We're hearing a new proposal now that Representative Roy Ball Allard has worked over the weekend on that they're going to present. I look forward to seeing that.
But
these
what
are
if
the
it
types
doesn't
of steps.
include money for the wall? Should they give in and give him something that could be called a wall just to get past this?
Look, I think that you have to have first steps. They presented their first step in the Senate with the Senate bill, Mitch McConnell's bill, putting forward that they're going to vote on tomorrow. Now it's time for us to put our position forward, being, does it deal with border security? How does it deal with border security? Does it deal with Dreamers? Is it just for DACA recipients, or is it for the entire Dreamers? Is it just a 3-year renewable status, or is it for actual pathway to legal permanent residence? Dealing with TPS recipients as well. What's out there? We need to actually put something forward, and I'm glad to hear that our leadership is doing. You need to be able to do that. Have these first salvos, then come to the table and actually talk about it. Enough with the letters, enough with the going back and forth. Come to the table and start talking about policy, not politics at this point.
If the shutdown is still on, should the Speaker invite him and permit him, final say, to give the State of the Union from the House chamber?
And that's exactly it. It's going to be up to the Speaker. At this point, I don't think it's going to happen if we're still shut down.
I want to ask you about the resolution. Help me here on whether this would be binding. It passed the House overwhelmingly. You had Republican votes. There's a similar bill in the Senate, I believe, which would deny any president the ability to get out of NATO. And this is an extraordinary, unprecedented piece of legislation, but prompted by the fact that we have credible reporting. I have it from people who were in the room when he threatened to get out of NATO at the last NATO summit. He's spoken of it since. Now you have General Mattis resign. Let me ask you, what prompted you?
Yeah.
You're an Afghan war veteran as well.
That's correct. Well, look,
which is partly a NATO coalition enterprise.
That's correct. And based on my time over there, I saw firsthand on the battlefield the importance of having our NATO allies there. They've been with us for 70 years. We've been with them for 7 decades. And that relationship needs to continue, not only because of what has happened, basically meeting our goals of why NATO was created, but also what it will continue to do, be it with the fight against terrorism, be it with pushing back on Russian aggression. But let me tell you, it was so interesting. On the floor yesterday, as this vote was going down, I was so surprised at the number of members that came up to me, both Republican and Democrat, who said, I can't believe that we have to do this, but this is what we have to do, and I'm voting for your bill.
Now, what's going to happen next? Is there a way that this could be binding on the president?
Well, the Senate is going to take it up. They have their version, as you said. Our version prevents any funding for any sort of withdrawal from NATO. They have their version that says it has to be 2/3 vote from the Senate. It will be combined, and hopefully they vote on it. Hopefully they do the right thing and pass it, and then it's going to be put in front of the president. And hopefully the president, as he said the other day, that we're 100% with NATO. If so, sign my bill.
Now, you've obviously a famous name. Let me just point out, you're obviously, for our viewers, you are the son of Leon and Sylvia Panetta.
They can recognize me by the nose, I'm sure.
Yeah, you know, former defense secretary, former CIA director, former House budget chair, former White House chief of staff, and others issues. But you're here on your own right, and
correct.
You got this bill passed.
Yeah,
congratulations.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
It's great to
Appreciate
see you.
it. Good to see you.
Thank you. Casey Hunt on the Hill. What about the reaction from Pelosi and Speaker Pelosi and the leadership to this letter from the president?
Andrea, we're still waiting on a formal reaction. I am told that we will be the first to receive it when, in fact, the Speaker decides to get back to the president on this letter. But as you rightfully point out, the simple reality of this situation is that Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House, and she controls the floor of the House of Representatives, and not just anybody is even allowed to walk out onto the floor, let alone give an enormous nationally televised address that is a, moment for the country. So the president seems to be insisting that he's just going to show up. But the reality is he would be barred from walking onto the House floor. And there are some other steps in there. I mean, both the House and the Senate pass a resolution typically to set the stage for the State of the Union, for the joint session of the Congress. It's a pretty rare event. So the president's letter is written as though he can just do what he wants when, the reality of the situation, that is simply not the case.
Casey Hunt, we're going to stand by for reaction. We'll have a lot more on this breaking news.